What's going on, guys? Sticks here at the Token Minorities, bringing you another random Sunday upload, and today I'm bringing you a really awesome deck that I found while perusing the 60 cards forums, and that is a deck centered around Espeon-GX and Decidueye-GX. Yes, I know I'm doing a ton of different Decidueye decks, but this thing is just so freaking versatile, and this was the first time that I found a pairing with something that wasn't grass, and wasn't Seismitoad. So I decided to look at it and was like, wow, this is a really cool deck. So I'm going to bring that to you guys on this relaxing Sunday. And as for the question of the day, it's a Sunday. I'm not putting too much effort into the question. It's going to be the exact same one that I've had. And how's your guys' week been? And do you have anything exciting coming up this next week? I mean, just plain and simple as that. How was your week? And do you have anything exciting coming up? For me, it's really just been kind of chill. I'm in my gap year before I go off to med school, so I've just been working little odd jobs here and there, so nothing particularly exciting, but my life is still very busy. It's just a continuous stream of the same type of stuff every week, but hey, I mean, that's not a bad thing, especially if it's working the way it is. So yeah, comment section below. Let me know how your week was, or if you have something exciting planned for next week. Actually, you know what? And if you have something exciting, you're not limited to one or the other. But anyway, on to the actual deck, like I said, centered around Espeon-GX and Decidueye. Now, I've done decks that work around both of these guys before. However, I've never worked with both of them in tandem. I mean, Espeon-GX, very solid attacker. I mean, I'm starting to become more of a fan of Espeon as I play it. Admittedly, I'm still a bigger fan of Umbreon. I love Umbreon. I'm kind of partial to dark types in the TCG. But Umbreon is still really cool. Psychic, if your opponent just has 2 energy on it, Psychic is doing 120, which is really amazing. And then the really unseen synergy between these two at the time of when I was just literally looking at the deck list is the synergy between Divide-GX and Feather Arrow. Everybody knows what Feather Arrow does at this point. You just put 2 energy around on your opponent's board once per turn. If you have multiple Decidueye up, they stack. Insane ability, and I mean, Decidueye is just so ridiculously good. And the synergy with Divide-GX is now, instead of just 6 damage counters between 3 Decidueye or 10 damage counters between 1 Espeon, you have the ability to put 16 damage counters wherever you want in one turn. That is absolutely insane, and that is so good. It can single-handedly just win you some matchups, especially because Espeon isn't going to be one-shotting anything. So the majority of the times there will be quite a bit of damage on the board. That's where things like Lysandre come in. You can bring something else in, your opponent might just retreat the damaged Pokemon into something on the bench to where you're like, oh, well, that thing is heavily damaged, I'd like to bring it out, but I don't have the means to. That's where you can take ridiculous turns with this deck. Just be like, okay, my opponent has 3 EXs that are within 50 damage of getting knocked out. Oh, hey, I'm just going to win this turn. I'm just going to take all 6 prizes in one turn with 3 Feather Arrows and a Divide-GX. And you'd actually be surprised how often you can get all 3 Decidueye up. Yeah, you run into a lot of prize problems in certain cases, but I've been able to get up all 3 Decidueye surprisingly often for a deck that only runs 3/3/3 of that line. So definitely try this deck out. I have tried it out. I was skeptical at first, but as I tried it out, I would highly recommend it for you guys. As for the Pokemon, running 4 Eevee, because I mean, we always want to have an Eevee available for an Espeon. Gotta run the Energy Evolution, as you can get an Espeon turn 1. And I know that this thing has a nasty 2 retreat cost, which, I mean, you don't expect that from an Eevee. You expect Eevee to have like a 1 retreat cost. But for some reason, this Eevee just spent too much time at McDonald's, so it is a little extra fat. And, but I mean, either way, Energy Evolution is just so strong that you cannot afford to not have that in this deck, especially with the ability to attack turn 1 with Psybeam. The other evolution we're running in this deck is Jolteon, because, okay, I'm going to go down the matchups and talk about why we're only running a single Jolteon. Against Volcanion, Volcanion likes to have a a decent amount of energy on their Volcanions, so while they can hit incredibly hard, and while Espeon will not be able to necessarily one-shot them, and they can one-shot us back, so first of all, I'm just going to say Volcanion is one of the worst matchups for this deck. I mean, you still definitely have the ability to beat it, because Volcanions like to have 3 energy on it, Psychic does 150, you can just use 2 Feather Arrows to knock out a Volcanion EX from there. So, I mean, this deck has the ability to deal with Volcanion. That being said, it is one of the worst matchups for this deck, and if you want to run it on your own, I would recommend maybe getting rid of a Level Ball for a Vaporeon, or heck, you could even get rid of Lugia for a Vaporeon, but I just really like what Lugia does bring to this deck. So that's why I'm keeping the deck list as is. So Vaporeon is for the Volcanion matchup. Yes, that matchup is bad for us. However, we're not attacking with a Fire Weak Pokemon, and we do have the ability to deal with that deck in certain situations. For Flareon, that would be going up against other grass decks. And the fact that we'd immediately be able to take advantage of their Forest of Plants with our own Decidueye means that, okay, we're already, like, kind of even going into the grass decks. Well, against a Vileplume deck, our Espeon is going to be hitting harder than their Decidueye. Their Decidueye has to have 3 energy in order to be able to Razor Leaf for 90. Well, if they have 3 energy on their Decidueye, Espeon's hitting for 150. So against a grass mirror match, we actually have the advantage just because of Espeon being able to hit harder, which allows us to not have to run Flareon. Finally, Jolteon. This is for Mega Rayquaza. Now, if you see Volcanion more than Mega Rayquaza, I would suggest switching out Jolteon for Vaporeon. But I run into Mega Rayquaza a surprising amount, and Yveltal as well. So I mean, there's just enough. There's enough lightning weak decks in the standard meta to where Jolteon is very useful in a lot of situations, especially with all the grass decks running Lugia, every single deck in existence running Shaymin, and then the decks that rely on attacking with lightning weak pokes, like I said, being Yveltal and Mega Rayquaza. That's why Jolteon is here, just because lightning is the most omnipresent weakness in a lot of decks. So again, that's just my opinion. This was the Pokemon that was used in the list. So, in the list on 60 cards, so I just decided to stick with it. However, definitely try out the other evolutions and let me know which one you guys had the most success with. So yeah, 1 Jolteon, 3 Espeon, just 3 evolutions for our 4 evolutions for our 4 Eevee I cannot count today. 1 Lugia, because Arrow Ball and Deep Hurricane are so good. Arrow Ball, just slap a DCE and be like, okay, you built up a lot of energy on your attacker. I'm going to hit you pretty hard. Lugia is a nice starter, but then again, so is Espeon. So, I mean, Lugia, it's really just a matter of preference at this point. I like Lugia, and also it gives us kind of an option against Glaceon, even though that thing isn't really running around too much, although Water Box is just going to get better with Aqua Patch in this upcoming set, so I'm pretty scared about that. But Lugia is just an awesome secondary attacker to where you don't have to necessarily put Espeon in harm's way. And also, considering we can't attack with Decidueye with this current list, having another attacker that's not Espeon is very necessary. 2 Shaymin, just to draw some cards, try to get as fast a setup as possible, and aka try to get a couple Decidueye up turn 1. 3-3-3 of our line of Rowlet through Decidueye. I'd like to run 4-4-4, but as you can see, this deck already runs 20 Pokemon, and yeah, we don't need to overload the deck with Pokemon to where we just draw dead. As for the searching, 3 Level Ball, 4 Ultra Ball, 3 Level Ball, search out all 4 Eevee, plus Rowlet and Dartrix, and then also the Jolteon in the situation where you need it. So, I know I usually run like 2 Level Ball in my deck list. However, in this list, I think that 3 is actually quite a bit better because you have so many crucial Pokemon that you search out with Level Ball that having 3 is actually pretty good. 1 Revitalizer in case you have don't have a Forest of Giant Plants up and you have to discard a Dartrix and a Decidueye. Just kind of a good all-around, like, okay, I have to discard those guys, I can get them back later. 4 Trainers Mail, help with consistency. 4 Ultra Ball, get us what we want when we want. 4 VS Seeker to reuse all of our supporters. And then as for these supporters, 3-3 of Sycamore and N. I know that I usually like to run 4-2. However, in this deck, you have enough evolutions that you might not necessarily be able to play all at once. And N is just a great way of being like, okay, just put those back in the deck. And then also, one cool thing you can do with this deck is spread around damage with Feather Arrow, and then divide, and then just attack with Espeon, to where your opponent can be down to like 3 prizes while you're still at 6. You can end your opponent, and then, like I was alluding to earlier, just take one gigantic turn with Feather Arrow and Divide, where you take like 4 or 5 prizes. That is very, very attainable with this deck. And that's why I like the heavier line of N than Sycamore, because it's very strategic. You let yourself fall behind in order to get a bunch of damage on the board. That way, late in the game, you end your opponent to where hopefully they don't have the resources they need to win the game, and you just take a gigantic turn, so all of a sudden you have a huge hand, and your opponent has a hand of like 2 or 3 cards. So a lot of synergy with this deck in N, which is why I like the 3-3 of N and Sycamore. 2 Lysandre, of course, because Lysandre is freaking amazing. And then the tech supporter in this deck is 1 Olympia, because a lot of our Pokemon will be taking damage, and not a lot of them will be one-shotted. I mean, Espeon against Espeon can one-shot each other, so that's kind of funny, but otherwise, Espeon's not necessarily going to go down in one hit. Espeons can attack for 1 energy, so playing an Olympia heals them off as you bring them to the bench, and you're able to attack with another Espeon that you have up. And also, if a Decidueye gets Lysandred up and hit for some damage, and you don't have a Float Stone or a DCE, Olympia is just another way to switch that Decidueye out of the active spot. 2 Float Stone for Decidueye, just basically put them, be like, okay, my opponent can Lysandre if they want, otherwise I'm not going to worry about it. Like, my Decidueye are bulky enough, but they also have a 2 energy retreat cost, so yeah, Float Stone Decidueye so I don't have to attach energy to you in order to get you out of the active. And then as for the energy, 4 DCE and 6 Psychic. This is a very peculiar line. One thing you could do in this deck is get rid of a Level Ball and a Lugia to run a couple Grass. That way you have Decidueye as an attacker as well, but then you open yourself up to more Glaceon plays. I mean, basically what I'm trying to say is, this deck does not have the option with this list to attack with Decidueye. If you throw in a couple Grass energy, then I could potentially see it working. But I'm just not sure what necessarily you would get rid of in this list in order to throw in enough Grass energy to where you would be able to consistently get them when you want them. Because, I mean, I guess you could get rid of 1 Level Ball and 1 Trainer's Mail to throw in a couple Grass energy, but then that does clog up the deck a little bit. You don't get what search you want when you want. And from my testing with this deck, I found that simply just relying on Espeon as the main attacker is more than enough, and you are good to go with Espeon as the main attacker. You don't need Decidueye. Feather Arrow is all the damage you need. But anyway, I just realized I'm rambling. Let's go ahead and see this deck in action. Alrighty, we have found one against Miguel Man 11 with a pure water deck, so kinda wish I had Decidueye be able to attack in this matchup, as we would have the type advantage. But either way, I mean, we still have Decidueye, so I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. Speaking of which, we do start with the full line, and if I can somehow get a Forest of Giant Plants turn 1, that'd be phenomenal. Unfortunately, doesn't look like I'm going to be able to get that, and while I could go for a Shaymin with this Ultra Ball to get like a couple cards, I think I'm just going to go immediately for an Eevee, and there are all 3 Forest of Giant Plants in my deck, so I think I'm just going to play the Eevee and evolve it into an Espeon to get that turn 1 Espeon. Because, I mean, like, that's the best play anyway. Yeah, I'm going to be getting rid of a Decidueye and a Dartrix, but I do run the Revitalizer, so if I hit that along with a Forest, then guess what? I'll be able to have a turn 1 Decidueye. Unfortunately, doesn't look like I hit that, so I am going to go ahead and Ultra Ball, get rid of the Olympia and the Lysandre, probably just grab another Rowlet to try to start getting that set up, because if I can get a Forest of Giant Plants off of my Trainer's Mail, then I can evolve. Unfortunately, do not, so I'm just going to grab that VS Seeker, set myself up for next turn, and you know what? Let's just Shaymin, get 3 cards, see if we can draw into a Forest this turn, and we do not. So, draw into a bunch of DCEs, which means that I'm going to want to end next turn, Just because, I mean, I really do not want to have to discard all of the... I really don't want to discard the DCE and the Grass Energy. So, I mean, I'll probably just end depending on what my opponent has. Because if they have... I mean, if they're able to get a pretty good setup, then I'll just leave well enough alone, let my opponent have their hand of nothing. And, okay, they do get a... they get a Rough Seas down and a Lily. So, yeah, I'm going to end, because if they hadn't played a supporter, then I would have been tempted to Sycamore, but I'm probably just going to play the end, try to conserve my DCE, and go from there. My opponent actually is getting a pretty solid setup. I mean, anytime you can get a Lily turn 1, that is great. They've already got 3 energy on the Poplio, so that thing, once it becomes a Brion, is going to be scary. Let's go ahead and Level Ball, grab the other Dartrix. That way I can just go ahead and get those... Actually, do I want to grab the Dartrix? Yeah, let's just go ahead and grab that Dartrix. That way once I draw a Forest of Giant Plants, I'm saying once, not if, just I'm trying to be optimistic. So let's go ahead and evolve both of my Rowlet into Dartrix, play the DCE onto my Espeon, and that DCE just turned into a Fire Energy. I don't know what is going on. And, alright, so I get a Forest, but I don't get a Decidueye. So at this point, I'm just going to play the Eevee down. I'm holding on to the Forest so I can counter their Rough Seas once I'm able to get damage down. There's absolutely no reason for me to play the Rough Seas when there's no damage, or play the Forest Giant Plants when there is no damage on board and when I can't take advantage of it by evolving into Decidueye. So I'm just going to hold on to it for the time being. My opponent is going to Dive Ball for a Brion. Luckily, he has not been able to get a not a Decidueye, the water starter, the Primarina. Luckily, my opponent has not been able to get a Primarina up yet. And actually, this turn, what I'm going to do is, I know I have a Lysandre in my discard pile. I'm going to go counter my opponent's Stadium, and then let's grab the N. Just because, I mean, I want to draw some cards and wait. Do I want to... I mean, you know what? I wouldn't be able to knock out the Brion. Sorry, I was under the impression that I could Lysandre and N in a turn, which you cannot. So, I'm gonna Lysandre up that Brion and just knock it out with a Psychic. I mean, that's something that I'm going to... I'd rather just go ahead and deal with that thing as it is right now. Get 3 energy off the board. Save my DCE for my Eevee next turn. My opponent had to play a Kukui as a draw supporter, so they clearly didn't have much. And that's... Yeah, I played my Forest of Giant Plants, but again, that was me being like, oh, I can Lysandre and go for an N in the same turn. And don't get me wrong, I was also kind of conflicted about whether or not I would want to go for a... Divide GX just to get rid of that Brion as well, but I decided, you know what, no use tempting fate. I'm just going to go ahead and take a knockout on something with 3 energy while I have the guarantee, and I mean, it put me no further behind. My opponent is able to get a Primarina this turn, which is pretty scary. However, I do draw into a pretty awesome hand. I mean, that's no two ways about it. I get a Decidueye, I'm going to be able to get a Float Stone on that sucker, play down another Eevee, and get a Psychic Energy onto whichever Eevee I choose, just to evolve that into an Espeon-GX. I mean, get something started in the background. Unfortunately, with the Rough Seas in play, I will not be able to take advantage of Feather Arrow and stuff like that to its fullest extent, because Rough Seas will be able to just counter that. So let's go ahead and grab the Eevee, Trainers Mail, see what I can get. And ooh, I do get a Forest of Giant Plants. So I will be able to counter that Rough Seas to get a little bit more use out of Feather Arrow. Actually, I'm just gonna Feather Arrow right now, set up my opponent's Regice to be knocked out next turn. And yeah, let's go ahead and counter that, meaning that I will be able to knock out the Regice with a single Feather Arrow next turn. Let's Psychic. I mean, I could have Divide GX'd, but I want to save that for when I'm able to just take multiple knockouts in one turn. I mean, that Manaphy is a sitting duck for Feather Arrow plus Divide GX. However, I'm going to bide my time, only do that when I have like firm board control to where I don't need to worry about trying to take attacks later. And my opponent is just going to go ahead and bring up the Primarina, be able to Bubble Beat, and try to disrupt me, but I still have a hand of 5. And that is just fine. I draw into some pretty decent stuff, to say the least. And my opponent doesn't get a Rough Seas. That is gigantic. That means I will be able to knock out the Regice, get an energy off the board, and I even get a Sycamore. So while I have a bunch of awesome stuff in my hand, I think I'm just going to Sycamore, increase my odds of better ends later in the game. I have another Forested Giant Plant, so what I am going to do is evolve my other Espeon up, play the DCE onto my other Espeon, and it turned into a Fire Energy again. Then let's knock out the Regice, take a prize. Probably going to play the Float Stone onto my Decidueye, just... Ooh, I get another DCE, that's nice. Let's Feather Arrow, start setting up the Primarina for some pretty good damage, because I'm going to be able to hit it for 120 this turn. And while I could Divide GX, I'm waiting for a turn where I can hit Manaphy and damage Primarina significantly with the Divide GX. Right now, actually, you know what? I probably won't even be able to... Oh, I will be able to knock out the Primarina. But at this point, I think... Well, I mean, my best play is to just sit here because my opponent forfeited. What I was going to do was Feather Arrow up the Manaphy twice and then knock out the Primarina. Even if my opponent got a Rough Seas, Manaphy was still in range of Divide GX plus 2 Feather Arrows. So, like I said, I had the knockout to win the game on that Manaphy at any point that I wanted. I just wanted to save that for my last 2 prizes in case I needed the Divide GX for something later, or that way my opponent couldn't really take full advantage of the end to put me down to a low hand size. Because, I mean, as long as I had those 2 Espeon on the board and even one Decidueye, I would have been at a point where the Manaphy was just that GX and a Feather Arrow away from being knocked out. So yeah, pretty solid first game. Unfortunately, my opponent didn't get much going. I mean, either way, we were able to get going and take the knockouts that we needed to win the game. So yeah, that was that game. Let's go ahead and try to find another one with this deck. Alrighty, we have found another one against Shrey with an interesting looking deck. I mean, if I encountered this in Legacy, I'd be like, oh yeah, he's running a Virizion Genesect Celebi Prime deck. But I mean, even we see the Plasma coin, so that's just kind of funny. But I'm actually very curious to see what my opponent is running. I do start off with a very, very nice hand. I have an Eevee, I have a Rowlet, I have a Dartrix, should I be able to get a Forested Giant Plant in play. I have an N as draw support, I'm going to be able to get an Espeon turn 1, so, I mean, that's pretty nice. And, ooh, I see what my opponent is running. That is awesome. I have this deck, and I've been wanting to try it for a very long time, but I just haven't. Like, I just have not found the motivation to use it. I mean, it's a very, very, very cool deck. Lurantis Solgaleo, for those of you guys who were just kind of glancing off or in La La Land when my opponent mulled again. But, I mean, it's a very, very cool deck that I've had and I've been wanting to do for a while, but admittedly, I've just kind of been super lazy when it comes to that, and I haven't gotten around to it. So, my opponent does just play an energy onto the Cosmog, and... Okay, so the weakness policy is not going to be doing anything for him in this game. I mean, he does see the Eevee, but he doesn't know that I'm not running Flareon in this deck. I mean, don't get me wrong, Flareon would be nice, but, I mean, I don't run Flareon in this deck, plain and simple. My opponent has to Kukui as his draw supporter for the turn, so that is bad for him. Plays a Float Stone onto the Lurantis, and if I draw the right cards, I'm going to be able to get a turn one knockout with this deck. So what I am going to do is go ahead and Ultra Ball for a Rowlet, because if I can get 2 Decidueye up, then I can knock out my opponent's Cosmog turn 1 with a Rowlet, with my Psybeam from my Espeon. So I am going to go ahead and use the Energy Evolution to evolve into an Espeon-GX, play the Trainer's Mail, see if I can get a Forest, which I do, and now comes the priority of needing to get a draw supporter. I want a Sycamore. I don't want to end because my opponent doesn't have anything. And Ultra Ball works just as well. Let's play the Forest, play a Dartrix down. So all I need is a Dartrix and 2 Decidueye. Let's go ahead and Ultra Ball grab a Shaymin. It's my only Shaymin, so I have to be kind of smart with how I play it. Let's play that sucker down. Draw until we have 6 cards, and hopefully we get a Sycamore, which we do. Oh, that's not good. So, let's go ahead and Level Ball. There is another Dartrix in my deck, which I'm going to get with my other Level Ball. Okay, so here's the question. Do I want to go for it and get rid of 2 DCEs this early in the game? So, I mean, I'm going to go ahead and grab the Dartrix. Do I want to Sycamore away my hand to try to draw into the 2 Decidueye? I think that that is my best play. Try to get that energy off the board as quickly as possible. I get 1 Decidueye. Can I get an Ultra Ball to get me another? Because that will be huge, and unfortunately, I do not. So, just miss out on the dream turn 1 of being able to knock out my opponent's Cosmog. I am just going to go ahead and Feather Arrow. Yeah, let's just go ahead and Feather Arrow this Cosmog and then Psybeam it for 50 damage. Unfortunately, Cosmog is weak to Dark, not Psychic, so I'm not able to take advantage of the weakness there. And so, very sad day. And my opponent, of his 4 cards, has a Rare Candy Solgaleo. Of course he does. Why wouldn't he? Oh, man, I wish I could get 4 cards that are like that. But, I mean, either way, my opponent does have to Kukui for his draw support this turn. So, I mean, at least that's something. Unfortunately, he will be able to Soul Burst GX, which is going to be kind of scary because he will have not only this Solgaleo setup, but a Cosmog setup in the background and have an energy on the Fomantis in the background. That way it can Flower Supply when it becomes a Lurantis. So, very, 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 very scary. I'm kind of worried about that at this point. But, I mean, either way, nothing we can do about it now, and at least I will be able to Psychic it for a good amount of damage if I'm able to draw a DCE. Unfortunately, I did get rid of my DCEs, of 2 of my DCEs with my Sycamore that last turn, so, very unfortunate. I kind of just had to work, I kind of just had to rely on being able to draw into it, and I do not. So, that's even worse. And this match is kind of going a little bit downhill fast. So I really should have just played it safe, not discarded my DCEs, held on to the Sycamore, and then played the DCE onto my Espeon later. I am just going to Ultra Ball, get another Decidueye in play, so at the very least, I can have those Feather Arrows building up consistently. So let's play that down right there. Let's go ahead and Feather Arrow. I mean, honestly, I think I just need to target down the Solgaleo because this is very scary. On the bright side, I will be able to confuse it. So that is very nice. Be able to get the confusion off there. Actually, you know what? Hindsight 2020, I really probably should have at least put 20 damage on that. Never mind. I was going to say put 20 damage on that Cosmog. That way I can Feather Arrow it for the knockout next turn. And my opponent flips heads. So, despite my opponent not drawing anything, he is getting everything he could possibly want, and that is very frustrating. Wow, okay. Man, I wish I could be that lucky. I mean, I get a Sycamore, but at this point, screw it. I'm just going to end. I don't want to get rid of a Draw Supporter and a VS Seeker all in one turn. Man, this is bad. Like, I'm getting draw support, but I'm getting rid of resources, and my opponent is able to draw into all the resources that he could want. I do have my Lysandre. Let's just go ahead and end. I need that DCE so I can at least get some decent damage off. I mean, yeah, it gives my opponent 4 cards, but he would have had... I mean, he probably got 2 decent ones off the prizes anyway. Let's grab a Revital... No. I want to grab... Yeah, let's grab... No, oh wait, there's a Float Stone. This is why I need to scroll all the way through my Trainers Mail. I'm so used to having the only useful stuff be the front cards and not having anything useful be in the last be the last card. So now I'm going to start Feather Arrowing that Cosmoem on the bench because that thing is that thing's going to be a pain if I can get it up, if he gets up to a Solgaleo. So what I am going to do is just go ahead and divide GX, knock that thing out, because that's the only thing with energy on the board right now. And then I will probably just spread damage around to the Fomantis, and then one on the or a couple on the Fomantis, and then probably just one on the Solgaleo, because I won't be able to knock out the Fomantis. I can Feather Arrow to knock it out next turn. In Solgaleo, I might as well put it in like an even number range of Feather Arrows and Psychics later. So I mean that's what I'm going for right now. I'm in an okay. Never mind. My opponent just got a Lurantis, so jeez, that's ridiculous. My opponent's getting everything. Why can't I get everything? Why can't I be the man who has everything? I don't understand. But either way, my opponent is going to get himself 4 cards, give me 5 cards. That's fine with me, especially with the cards that I draw. So I can... my opponent's not going to be able to knock me out. Or he's going to be able to damage me, but he's not going to be able to knock me out this turn. What I can do is... Is that Cosmog a threat? So I'm at an odd prize exchange right now. I will have to take a single prize on something later in the game. So while I could start targeting down that Cosmog, see, here's the problem. Like, I could target down the Cosmogs, but it's going to be a 2-turn thing. Like, I'm not going to be able to, Oh, he brings up a Cosmog. So he's giving me a prize. I don't think I want that, though. Well, what I do want is to go ahead and evolve my Eevee into an Espeon to have a backup attacker should my opponent knock me out. Or, yeah, should my opponent knock me out. There is a Dartrix in my prizes. What I actually am going to go ahead and do is go ahead and Lysandre up my opponent's Lurantis, because I can get 90 damage off on that thing. And let's go ahead and Feather Arrow it once to go ahead and, just get it closer to being knocked out. I actually shouldn't have done that. I probably should have just spread more damage on the Solgaleo or one of the Cosmogs to get those things closer to being knocked out, because the Lurantis was in range of 2 Psychics anyway. And he wasn't in range of being, and he wasn't even in a position where he would be able to use the attack that heals off damage. So that was a misplay on my part. That's where I kind of get conflicted about where to spread my Feather Arrows. Just because I'm like, well, I could put it here, but I also want to put it here, and I want to put it here, and then what I end up doing is just spreading it all out to where it really doesn't accomplish much. So, a little bit unfortunate right there. My opponent is starting to get another... He will get his Solgaleo powered up this turn, and this is going to get tricky. This is going to get very tricky, because my Espeon's in trouble. I have the end, so I'm not worried about decking out. I did notice that I have a low deck size, so I'm not worried about that. Solgaleo will be able to knock out something next turn. Let's go ahead and Feather Arrow. What do I want to Feather Arrow? I can set up the Shaymin to be knocked out. I can keep piling up on that Cosmoem. Oh, and my opponent got a Cosmoem as well. Come on now. I could keep piling up on the Cosmoem. I could also set up the Lurantis to be knocked out next turn. What I think I'm just going to do is Feather Arrow twice onto the Lurantis. Set it up to be knocked out by a Feather Arrow next turn. Just Olympia out into a Decidueye. Yeah, let's Olympia out into a Decidueye. Decidueye does not get knocked out in one hit by Sunsteel Strike. This way my opponent... he can power up Cosmoem and Cosmog in the background with his Lurantis and Flower Supply, but at least this way I'm not going to get knocked out by a Sunsteel Strike this turn. I just need to delay my opponent getting prizes, because while he can attack, I can keep spreading around damage with Feather Arrow, and I have enough damage on the board to where it's going to be pretty significant, and it's going to get me knockouts that I need. And my opponent does just decide to Flower Supply. I get a Rowlet. So let's go ahead and play... Actually, you know what? before I play my Rowlet, because I want to draw into my Dartrix off the prizes, but I don't want to play my Rowlet if I don't get it. So let's go ahead and see what we can get off the prizes. Get a Sycamore. Ah, there's the Dartrix. That is beautiful. Okay, so I will have 3 Decidueyes in play at this point. Actually, let's first... Okay, so my opponent promotes the Shaymin. What is he doing? Is he trying to bait my Espeon in? But let's go... Okay, let's go ahead and get another Decidueye up. I have one more Feather Arrow that I can do. I can put it on the Shaymin. Set it up. Yeah, let's do that. And then I'm just going to retreat. I could Psychic the Shaymin, put it in range of just a Feather Arrow next turn. But I think... No, because I need... Okay, the only way I want to do that is if I'm going to have the resources available to triple Feather Arrow the Cosmog next turn. If I can manage to triple... If I have a turn available to triple Feather Arrow that Cosmog and take the knockout on the Shaymin, then I will be fine. Then I will go ahead and bring up my Espeon, knock out the Shaymin, and win the game. Because I cannot promote an Espeon as they will get knocked out by a Sunsteel Strike, and that is going to be kind of scary for me. So I have to keep my Decidueyes up, just spread damage around with Feather Arrow, put myself in a position where I can win, and only then am I going to send up my Espeon to attack. So, I mean, right now, I need 2 more turns. I need 2 more turns. I need to Feather Arrow the Shaymin once, and then spread some more damage around with Feather Arrow. I just need to set up knockouts to where I have a knockout on the board. I don't have to Feather Arrow at all to knock out an EX or GX, and then I can just completely Feather Arrow that Cosmog. Because I'm pretty sure I've used up all of my Lysandres at this point. My opponent is just going to hedge his bets at this point. I mean, might as well go for a Sunsteel Strike, knock out my... Or, not knock out my Decidueye, put my Decidueye 10 damage away from being knocked out. That is exactly why I promoted the Decidueye. And at this point, I have one card left in my deck. However, I do have that end. So let's go ahead and just pile up on the Shaymin. I think my best play at this point is to just pile up on the Shaymin, set that thing up to be knocked out next turn, and go from there. My opponent, I think, did make a misplay by putting an energy onto the undamaged Shaymin as opposed to the damaged Shaymin, because now I can use the free I can use that Shaymin as just a free couple prizes, because he won't be able to Sky Return to get all that damage off the board. I mean, either way, triple Feather Arrow 2 turns in a row would be able to knock out the Shaymin. Or would have been able to knock out one Shaymin or the other. But at least this way, my opponent, like, I'm going to be able to knock out that Shaymin with Feather Arrow, start piling up a little bit on the Cosmog, and, okay, I am out of cards. So what I am going to do now is Feather Arrow the Shaymin, and myself to where I only have 1 card, to where I only get 1 card off of that. And, ooh, I get a DCE. That's pretty nice. So let's go ahead and Feather Arrow. Not sure where I want to put it. I think the play is to Feather Arrow because... Do I want to put it on the Cosmog, the Shaymin, or the Solgaleo? Solgaleo still has 140 left. Shaymin has 120 and Cosmog has 60. Cosmog can evolve. Solgaleo is likely to become active. So what I think I'm going to do is attack the Solgaleo. Or, not attack the Solgaleo. Feather Arrow the Solgaleo. And then I'm going to try to bait it in this turn. Let's go ahead and just attach to the Decidueye, Feather Arrow my opponent's Solgaleo. And then, I mean, I'm going to retreat into an Espeon, bait my opponent into sending up Solgaleo. And I think, you know what, don't want to send up the Psychic Espeon or the Psybeam Espeon. Because, I mean, I still have an energy in my deck. I know that. But, let's go ahead and send up the Psybeam Espeon. Just, I mean, bait my opponent into attacking, into bringing up that damaged Solgaleo. And I do top deck a Sycamore, so I probably just should have brought up the Psychic Espeon to entice my opponent a little bit more to be able to attack. 'Cause, I mean, right now I'm only doing 10 damage to a Solgaleo. That's not very threatening. I mean, yeah, I'm getting 60 damage with my Decidueyes, and wow, another rare candy into Solgaleo. I am very happy I did not try to target that thing down. So my opponent is just going to switch into his Solgaleo. This is amazing. So he does take the bait. He does Sunsteel Strike, but now I'm going to take the win, because I'm going to be able to send up my Psychic Espeon. I'm going to be able to do 40 damage with Psychic. I'm going to be able to do 60 with 3 Feather Arrows, and whew, that was an intense game. That was a very, very intense game. I mean, wow, that was... Whew, my heart's actually really beating after that one. That was clutch. 3 Decidueyes came through ridiculously clutch for me. So, yeah, Decidueye, I'm seeing why you're so freaking meta-defining. That was a great, great, great game. My opponent played it very, very well. Luckily, the spread damage from Decidueye was enough to win me the game in the end. So, yeah, hope you guys enjoyed watching. Thank you so much. Like, comment, subscribe, all of that stuff. And this is Styx signing out. Why not? See you guys.